Easter is knocking at the door, and this is the time when every believer must stay more alert than ever. Because not everyone who believes in God will be saved. Not every church belongs to Him, and most importantly, Easter is not what you think it is. I know this may sound shocking, even blasphemous, but if you are brave enough to listen to this story until the end, I believe God will open your spiritual eyes, just as He did for this man. God gave him the mission to return to earth before Easter, to warn everyone because time is running out. Don't let this opportunity pass without hearing what He wants you to know before this significant event takes place. Not after Easter, not next year, but right now. Before we begin, please leave your name and the city you live in the comments so God can remember you before Easter takes place. If this story awakens you, don't forget to hit super thanks to support this mission. No matter how much you give, God will return it to you 100-fold. Together, let's build a strong community of faith by subscribing to the channel, where 20,000 hearts share God's love this month. Now, let's listen to his incredible testimony. My name is Mark. I'm 72 years old, and I live alone in an old wooden house on the outskirts of town. I built this house myself when I was still healthy and full of energy. Back then, I was a carpenter. Not a famous carpenter, but I was skilled enough to support my family, build a decent house, and even make a crib for each of my children when they were born. Many years have passed, and now the house has become empty. My children have left, one in this state, another in that one. They're busy, sometimes going a whole month without calling. I don't blame them. Life today moves so fast, everyone's busy, competing with each other. I understand, but sometimes I feel very lonely. There are meals when I sit alone, looking at the chair across from me where my wife used to sit before she passed away, and then I look up at the family photo on the wall, only able to sigh. I miss the times when the whole family gathered, the laughter, the smell of food wafting from the kitchen. Now, all that remains is the ticking of the clock. Perhaps the smell of coffee is the only thing that still gives me a little warmth in this life. I sit in my old chair, open my worn-out Bible, and read a few familiar verses. I don't read to seek knowledge, but to remind myself that God is still there. Even though no one remembers me, God has never forgotten me. In recent years, I've felt my body noticeably weakening. My left leg occasionally aches sharply, like being pricked by needles, and sometimes I can't stop coughing. I don't tell anyone, not because I'm hiding it, but because there's no one to tell. Have you ever felt like you're still alive, but it seems like the whole world has forgotten you? I feel that way almost every day. Have you ever sat and watched the sunset slowly fade on the floor, feeling your heart sink? If you have, maybe you'll understand me better. I still remember that day as if it happened just yesterday. It was an autumn afternoon with yellow leaves scattered all over the yard. I had just finished raking a pile of leaves under the maple tree in the backyard. Tired, but I kept going because I hate clutter. I went into the house, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down on my familiar wooden chair by the window. The soft afternoon sunlight gently glided through the thin curtains, casting a pale yellow hue over the room. I breathed out slowly, as if everything was still normal, still as simple as any other day. Then, suddenly, it hit. A dull pain at first, right in the center of my chest, and then it quickly spread like fire, burning everything. I bent over, my hands trembling as I held my chest, struggling to breathe but feeling as if my ribcage was being squeezed. Each heartbeat felt like a hammer pounding against my chest. I couldn't breathe. I reached for the landline phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. But my fingers felt awkward, like they no longer belonged to me. My left arm began to numb, sweat poured out like a shower, and the whole room started spinning. I began to panic, truly panic, like a child lost in a dark forest. I remember mumbling at the time, calling each of my children's names. Anna, Jack, someone help me. But there was no one. Everything around me seemed indifferent. I started thinking, is this it? Is this really the end? Then I remember nothing more. The pain seemed to pull me away, as if someone slowly, gently drew a curtain, and everything sank into darkness. After that moment, my heart beat for the last time, and everything seemed to fade away. There was only a strange feeling, as if all the weight had been lifted off of me. Then, suddenly, I saw myself. I lay motionless on the floor, my eyes slightly open, my hands relaxed. Strangely, I was looking down from above. It took me a few seconds to realize that it was my body. The feeling was unlike a dream. It was clear, vivid in every detail. I saw the broken glass of water beside me, the sunlight still coming through the window, and even the strands of grey hair hanging loosely over my forehead. I began to drift, slowly, gently, effortlessly, and without fear. There was a force pulling me forward, guiding me through a strange space, a pitch-black tunnel. Occasionally, I saw small glimmers of light, like flickering lights through the mist. Then I saw the light. A faint beam at the end of the tunnel, initially very small, but as I got closer it became clearer, warmer, as if something divine was waiting for me ahead. And I wasn't alone. I looked to both sides and saw other people walking too. They didn't speak, but each one wore an oddly peaceful expression. There were old people, young people, even a baby being held by a woman. Although no one spoke, there was a strange connection among us, as if we all knew where we were going and why. I no longer felt heavy, no longer sad. Everything seemed to peel away, the loneliness, the disappointment, the exhaustion. It all started to fade away. Do you believe me? There was a moment when I wondered, is this my true home? I had truly walked through that door, and I will tell you what awaits on the other side. As I passed through the entire tunnel, the seemingly endless darkness suddenly gave way to light. It didn't burst out violently, but spread gradually, like dawn breaking before my eyes. At first it was just a faint streak of light, but it kept growing, until I stepped completely out of the tunnel and into a dazzling realm of light. But strangely, it wasn't blinding. It didn't make me want to pull back. On the contrary, it was incredibly warm. The warmth didn't come from my skin, but from deep inside, as if all the pain, fear, and emptiness within me suddenly disappeared, making room for an absolute peace. In my 72 years of life, I had never felt love like that. Then I realized it was him. He stood there, in the light. There was no brilliant halo, no image like those in paintings or statues, but his presence radiated in a way that immediately made me want to kneel, not out of fear, but from the love in my heart. Almost instantly, I began to cry. I didn't know why. Perhaps it was from relief, perhaps from regret, or because I didn't think someone like me could stand before him. In that moment, I thought, I made it here, so what will God say to me? He didn't speak with his mouth as we do, but each word, each thought of his rang clear in my mind. Hello, Mark. You are not here to end, but to begin. I bowed my head, not daring to look up at him. I told myself, maybe he heard me. I am not worthy. I've hurt those I love. Sometimes I chose silence instead of speaking the truth. I've doubted, been weak. How can I be here in front of him? But he didn't scold, didn't condemn. He smiled. A smile that made me cry like a child. Mark, I do not choose the perfect ones. I choose those who know they need forgiveness. You are forgiven, not because you deserve it, but because my love is like that. When he said this, I felt like I was melting, not from shame, but because my heart suddenly felt incredibly light. The burdens of old age, the failures, the loneliness, they all seemed to disappear in the breath of forgiveness. But then, as he stepped closer, his voice suddenly grew serious, full of meaning. Mark, you cannot stay. You must return. There is work you need to do. You must warn everyone before this Easter. There will be great turmoil. Many souls are still asleep. Tell them what you have seen, felt, and understood. Tell them that I am waiting, but time is running out." I was stunned. Return? How could I bring these indescribable things back to the world? Who would believe an old carpenter like me? As if reading my thoughts, he placed his hand on my chest. "Light as the breeze, but as hot as sacred fire. Do not be afraid. I will be with you. Just speak the truth, and they will listen." In the blink of an eye, I found myself standing in an entirely different world, a modern city, filled with light, bustling traffic, and towering skyscrapers reaching towards the horizon. At first, I thought this was a vision of progress, of humanity's bright future. But the more I observed, the heavier my heart grew, because amidst the hustle and bustle, a cold loneliness was spreading everywhere. I saw a father sitting in a park, his eyes glued to his phone, while his young child played alone on a swing, looking very sad. I saw a young couple dining in a fancy restaurant, both staring at their phones, not looking at each other, as if love had been replaced by messages and likes. I passed by apartments with closed doors, lights shining through, but no voices, no laughter, just shadows of people silently passing by one another like ghosts in living bodies. Then I saw elderly people living quietly alone, like I had before, with children too busy to visit. I saw an elderly woman sitting by the window all day, her eyes looking outside, waiting for something, or perhaps someone, but no one came. I saw neighbors who had lived next to each other for over a decade, yet didn't know each other's names. When someone faced a crisis, people quickly turned away, avoiding contact, avoiding involvement. No one wanted to stop, no one wanted to be involved. They lived together, but didn't live for each other. Then I heard the voice of Jesus echo in my mind, neither sad nor angry, just an infinite sorrow. "Mark, do you see? When love is lost, man loses himself. They have forgotten each other, forgotten that we were not created to live alone, but to live for each other." I nodded. I understood. I saw more clearly than ever before. And in that moment, something very powerful ignited in my heart. An urge, a calling. He wanted me to remind that love is eternal, that sharing is not a burden, and that everyone needs someone else. They just forgot how to show it. I had seen the world where people miss each other even when they are very close, and I didn't want to see you lost in it. The Lord showed me many things, but that first image changed me forever. Then he led me to another realm where there were no city lights or cold people. Instead, I stood in a space both magnificent and chaotic, where everything that shone wasn't gold, but the delusion cloaked in gold. In front of me were enormous buildings, banks, casinos, stock exchanges, and colossal centers of power. I saw people jostling, competing with one another, as though taking one step too slow meant losing everything. I saw those who once were genuine, who once had simple dreams, gradually transforming. They began to lie for personal gain, betray friends, even sell their honor to achieve status, fame, a higher position, or a bigger deal. Some were politicians, some in business, some just ordinary workers, but all shared one desire: to have more and more, just for themselves. I witnessed rooms where people conspired about corruption, collusion, and twisting the truth. I saw children born into wealth yet growing up in loneliness, knowing no love except for material things. I saw wars erupt over oil, borders, and the interests of a small group, while millions of innocent people lost their homes, their loved ones, their hopes. Do you know what broke my heart the most? Amidst all those faces, I couldn't find true joy. They smiled, but the smiles were empty. They had everything: beautiful homes, fancy cars, power, their faces in the media, but their eyes were cold as ice. They had traded their souls and didn't even realize it. I turned to the Lord with all my choked emotions and asked, "Lord, why do people choose this instead of turning back to you and to each other?" The Lord didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at me with a deep, sorrowful gaze, then said something I will never forget. Because man believes happiness lies in what the eyes can see, but they forget that the soul does not see with the eyes. Having witnessed this, I want to ask you, do you see yourself in that picture? Have you ever chased something thinking it would bring happiness, only to feel empty afterward? I have, until I lost everything, and only then did I see things for what they truly are, through the eyes of a saint. I realized that happiness is not in wealth or the applause of others, but in the peace of the soul, in genuine hugs, in treating one another with kindness, and in knowing who you are and who your Creator is. After witnessing the corruption of humanity through materialism and power, the Lord led me to another vision. This time, I found myself standing in the midst of a world that seemed to have broken apart. It was not a peaceful world, but a world torn by deep wounds, increasingly widened by hatred and division among people. I saw streets filled with protests, angry crowds, banners raised high, and shouts full of rage. They weren't standing together but facing each other, as if each person had their own reason to hate the other. I saw religion and faith no longer as sources of nourishment, but as reasons that pushed people into hostility, killing, and division. Ethnic conflict was not just a matter of skin color, but a fear of what was different from oneself. Then I witnessed terrorist attacks, explosions, and innocent people falling in the streets. At one point I saw a mother holding her child in her arms, her face covered in blood, her eyes staring blankly ahead with utter despair. Violence and hatred had stolen countless innocent lives, and not only that, they had stripped people of their trust in each other. The sight left me choking with grief. Cities were destroyed, houses burned to the ground, children forced to live in fear, running from one place to another, and walls were being built not to protect but to divide people. People were fighting over political differences, ideological rifts, and skin color. In those conflicts I saw loss, not just material, but also loss of faith and humanity. The Lord stood beside me, looking at these scenes of suffering with a sad gaze. "This is the pain of the world," he said. I felt my heart tear apart as I looked at these images. The Lord did not say anything more, but through his gaze I understood that he was sorrowful because humanity refused to learn the lesson of love and reconciliation. I clearly remember one scene. I saw two men, one white, one black, standing opposite each other, their eyes filled with hatred. They exchanged harsh words, insults that made it hard for me to breathe. They held guns, not for protection but to destroy. Each gun, each word of hatred was a stab to their very hearts. I wondered, where will we go if we continue like this? In the sacred space, the voice of Jesus echoed, engraving into my soul an unforgettable command. Division is the path to destruction. Only love can save humanity. His words were like the wind blowing across the desert, gentle yet powerful, awakening me from the pain I had witnessed. He led me through broken scenes where war and violence roared, leaving shattered souls in their wake. I saw mothers holding their children in the smoke, their eyes filled with despair, cutting through my heart. Survivors limped forward, carrying wounds that would never heal, like lost ghosts wandering through life. I choked back tears as I realized that division wasn't just the walls out there, but the distances within human hearts, where love had been forgotten, where forgiveness had become a luxury. The Lord looked at me, his eyes deep with love but also filled with concern. He spoke gently, saying, "Mark, you must understand that only when humanity returns to love, forgiveness, and reconciliation will this world be able to be reborn. A world where hatred is the binding thread will only lead to darkness. Love and peace are the mission I give to you." His words were like light piercing through the dark clouds, kindling in me a fire of hope. I felt the weight of this mission, but also the belief that every individual could play a part in changing the world. I stood still, watching as people were divided by race, belief, or hatred. They faced each other with cold eyes, bitter words like arrows piercing their hearts. I thought, in pain, how can we let such small differences destroy the most precious thing, love between people? But the Lord taught me that no one can save the world alone. Every small action, whether a hug, an apology, or a moment of listening, is a brick in the bridge of reconciliation. Peace begins with you, he said, his voice deep and warm like a cool stream flowing into my soul. Then the Lord led me to another world, one where his presence seemed no longer to exist. I stood there, looking around, and felt an overwhelming emptiness. There were no temples, no prayers, no spiritual faith. All I saw were modern buildings, busy streets, and people rushing, but in their eyes there was no light of love or hope. It seemed as if this world had forgotten God. The people passing by me had no sense of his guidance in their hearts. They lived only for fleeting goals, superficial pleasures, and material obsessions. Churches, temples, and sacred places had become desolate lands, abandoned buildings where no one came to pray or seek peace. All I witnessed was a world that had forgotten God, as if he no longer existed in the lives of humanity. I walked through crowded streets where no one looked at each other, no one greeted each other. With cold eyes and hurried steps, they were like shadows passing through each other without ever stopping. There was no faith, no respect, and no one seeking guidance from the Lord. Conversations revolved only around work, money, sports, games, and entertainment. I felt no trace of belief in them. Families no longer prayed together, couples no longer talked about their faith, and parents no longer taught their children about the sacred. Faith was gradually fading, like a light about to go out. The teachings of love, forgiveness, and sacrifice from the Lord were being forgotten in the picture of modern society. Atheism was no longer a foreign concept. It had become a common way of life. People no longer thought about living according to God's will. Instead, they cared only about personal needs and the fleeting desires this world offered. God was no longer the center of their lives, no longer the guiding strength, no longer the great hope. I saw a family sitting at dinner, but no one gave thanks to God for the meal. They just sat in silence, eating in discouragement, with no connection between them. They ate because they had to, lived because they had to, but no longer saw the true value of life. There were couples no longer praying for each other, no longer sharing faith and hope. They lived together out of responsibility, out of habit, but love and deep connection had faded. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a sea of strangers, people who I could not find love or appreciation from. A world without God, without faith, a world left with only fatigue and despair. I felt the loneliness overshadow everything. People no longer found comfort in faith, no longer knew the forgiveness of God, living in emptiness. They chased after material pleasures, but every night they still felt an emptiness that could not be filled. As humans, when we no longer believe in God, we lose the light to guide our lives. We become invisible shadows, lost in our own lives, not knowing where the destination is, not knowing what the purpose of life is. There is no love, no forgiveness, no peace. And the most painful thing is that this lost path does not last just for a day or a week, but stretches through a lifetime without faith in God. The Lord looked at me and said, "Do you see, Mark, this is what happens when people forget me, when they no longer seek me in their lives. When I am pushed out of the lives of humans, this world becomes cold, empty, and directionless." I understood that without God, without His love, we would not be able to go anywhere. Only God can light up our lives once again. Only He can bring true peace. Amid the bleak images of indifference, greed, hatred, and the forgetting of God, a ray of hope shone through, dispelling the darkness in my heart. Jesus returned, not with sternness, but with comforting love, promising a bright future. He led me to another vision, where people were not tempted by material things or power, but longed for a meaningful life. I saw young people, the future generation, asking big questions. What is the meaning of life? How can I create a better world? They were not running after consumption or fleeting desires. In lively conversations, they volunteered, protected the environment, and built communities based on love. A group of young people sat in a circle, discussing how to help the homeless, not just with temporary handouts, but with sustainable change. I witnessed peace conferences, where young people from every nation set aside racial, religious, and political differences to find peaceful and just solutions. Jesus smiled and said, "They are the ones standing in the light who will change the world with love, sincerity, and patience." I felt the warmth of his words, like a fire warming my cold heart. Despite the challenges in the world, these small lights of kindness continued to spread. I also saw small communities in cities and villages where love and sharing were still alive. They helped each other overcome hardships, shared meals, and comforted one another in times of sorrow, despite not being materially wealthy. Jesus said, "Great change begins with small things. Do not underestimate the power of a heart that knows how to love." Finally, I saw those who fought for peace and justice, not through violence but with compassion. They protected the poor, the refugees, demanded justice for the oppressed, and never gave up despite the difficulties. Jesus encouraged, "They are the hope of the world, the bridge to a just future. Light will always overcome darkness." Hope filled my heart like a refreshing river in the desert. Jesus instructed, "Spread this message, Mark. Even when lost, humanity can find the light. You are not alone. I am with you." I returned, carrying with me a strong belief that it is never too late to awaken, determined to plant seeds of hope and love, believing that every small action will make the world brighter. Jesus entrusted me with a mission to return to the world and share the message he gave. I was filled with fear and doubt, questioning whether I was worthy, worried about being mocked or opposed. The feelings of loneliness and weakness overwhelmed me, but Jesus appeared and his loving light drove away my fear. He said, "You are not alone. I will give you strength, wisdom, and faith." He emphasized that I must share the message before Easter, the time of commemorating the resurrection, to awaken humanity to recognize the light in the darkness. A sense of peace filled my heart, and I was ready, though I knew the challenges ahead. Back in my body, I awoke in pain, weak and fragile. Beside my hospital bed, my children cried, their eyes full of concern and love. I embraced them, realizing that family love is my strength. This was not just a rebirth of the body, but the rebirth of love. Family became the driving force for me to begin my mission. I met people who were lost and shared God's light. Not everyone accepted it, but I persevered, sowing the seeds of love through small acts, helping, comforting, and listening. I emphasized the importance of forgiveness, believing that only love and forgiveness can heal wounded hearts and build a better community. Every day I walked along the path God laid out for me, upheld by his strength, moving closer to the greater purpose. I hope that one day I will see those I helped share God's light as well, trusting that his love will always be the guiding flame in the darkness. Faith in God is a great faith, and it is the only thing you need to hold on to when there are no other choices left in your life. Easter is very close now. Can humanity change everything before it's too late? Because if not, after Easter, the entire world will have to pay for the deeds of the past. This is the message that the writer of the next letter sent to us after experiencing a terrifying near-death experience. God's message has been delivered to this world, and you must be prepared to receive it. So, continue reading the second letter that follows. God often chooses broken souls to deliver warnings to a world lost in slumber, and the man whose letter was sent to us today is one of them. He once had everything, until a devastating event struck, leaving him with nothing and ultimately breathing his last breath on the side of the road. But in that very moment, Jesus appeared and personally brought him back with an urgent warning for humanity about the near future after Easter 2025. So, what awaits humanity after Easter 2025? Exactly when will the great turning point arrive, and how can we avoid falling into the subtle traps that are silently being prepared? Stay tuned until the end to understand what is truly approaching and to change in time before it's too late. Before we begin the story, please remember that God is always with those who seek Him with a sincere heart. Therefore, leave a comment saying your name _ the city you live in as a declaration before heaven, so that He may know the land where you stand and the secret prayers within your heart. Please click like and subscribe, for it is an action that steps into the awakening mission that God is giving to the final generation. Every action you take is a spark that helps spread the truth to the souls that need to be awakened. Now, here is his testimony. My name is John. At least, that was the name of a man who once had a home, a family, and dignity. But now, I'm just an 80-year-old man, my weary footsteps dragging along the cold sidewalk of a city that no longer has room for people like me. I have no home to return to, no one waiting for me. Lucy, my wife, went to be with the Lord a few years ago, and my children, they have their own lives now. Perhaps by now they've forgotten me. I'm like an old, broken chair, carelessly discarded on the side of the road once it no longer serves a purpose. A lifetime of sacrifice, working hard, saving every little bit, only for everything to vanish into thin air. Tom, my eldest son, used to be my greatest hope. Now he's my greatest pain. That boy once had a future. He was smart, quick-witted, and had a way of speaking that made people trust him. But then he fell into gambling, into debt. I don't even know when it all started. At first, he came with promises that were carefully, cleverly crafted. Dad, I know I've been wrong. I'll change. Then he cried, lamented about his suffering and begged me for help, just this once. And I, the foolish old man, the father who still believed in his son, handed him the last bit of money Lucy had left me, the money I had planned to live the rest of my days on. He promised he'd pay it back, promised he'd make things right, but then he disappeared. The phone calls went unanswered. The neighbors said they saw him move out, but no one knew where he went. He left me alone in the empty house, with growing debts to the bank, and more than just financial loss. He drained from me what was most precious, my trust in people. Holding the foreclosure notice in my hand, I felt as though the whole world was crashing down. Not because of the cold, hard numbers printed on it, but because I knew I had lost everything. It wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was the place where Lucy and I grew old together, where the kids grew up, played and laughed. And now, all of it had been washed away like dust. The early days living on the streets were a nightmare. No one is prepared for this. I didn't know where to go, where to return. By day I wandered aimlessly. By night I didn't know where to sleep. I remember the first night I slept under the bridge so clearly. The cold seeped into my bones. The wind howled through the cracks. The distant sound of traffic echoed above, and an overwhelming fear consumed me. I huddled, pulling my thin jacket tightly around me, but it was useless. Then I cried like a child. I used to believe in a merciful, just God. We used to pray before every meal. But now, when there are no meals to pray for, I began to wonder. Looking up at the endless night sky, I whispered, not a prayer, but a lament. Oh God, where are you? Do you see me? Why me? I've tried my best. Why have you let me fall this low? Or have you abandoned me too, like your children? All I could hear was the wind blowing through the bare branches, and the bitterness slowly seeped into every pore, every wrinkle on my face. I still clearly remember that day, March 14. I spent the entire day wandering, hoping to find a few odd jobs to earn enough for a hot meal. But no one needed an 80-year-old man. No one paid attention to me. The pain in my joints tormented me. Hunger clawed at my insides like a beast, and the cold seeped deep into my bones. Then dizziness struck. I tried to drag myself to the nearest bench in the park, where I usually slept every night. But suddenly the ground beneath my feet seemed to shake, and the whole world spun violently. Everything around me blurred, became unclear, and my ears were filled with a muffled sound, unable to hear anything clearly. A vague thought crossed my mind. Is this it? Am I finally getting some rest? But right at that moment, strange things began to happen. I no longer felt cold, no longer in pain, no longer exhausted. All the hunger, the sharp pain, the crushing despair suddenly vanished. I felt as light as a feather, as if I had just shed a burden that had weighed me down for my entire life. A freedom I had never known before. At first there was only darkness, but it wasn't the kind of darkness that frightens people. It was just a vast, quiet space, and strangely, I felt peace. I realized I was in another place, not on the cold bench in the dark park. It felt as though I was floating in an invisible, weightless space. Then I saw myself, an old man with grey hair, frail shoulders, lying motionless on the bench. But strangely, I didn't feel afraid. There was no pain that crushed me when I saw that image. And then light appeared. It was a warm, gentle, radiant light, a light that could not only be seen with the eyes but felt as well. It enveloped me, soothing me like a mother's embrace. A gentle force pulled me toward that light. There was no pressure, no fear, only an intense longing to draw closer. I began to hear a sound, a soft, sweet melody, so beautiful it was beyond words. It was as though the wind was singing, as if every sound in the universe had come together in harmony to create a song of peace. Perhaps I had truly found my way home. I continued moving toward the light, and honestly, at that moment, I didn't even remember if I was moving toward the light or being drawn into it, and within it, there was wisdom, an infinite love. Then a figure appeared from the light. I knew it was Jesus Christ. He stood there, simply, his bright robe flowing in the light. His face was not only gentle but also understanding, and without saying a word I felt small before him, not from fear or shame, but from a deep respect, like a child standing before a father who always loves them unconditionally. He reached out, his hand gently touching me. A warm wave spread from where his hand touched. I have always been with you, even when you couldn't feel me. Your pain I have also endured. The bitterness within me began to fade. There was no more anger, no more blaming, only a sense of relief. In my mind, he spoke, "John, you are here for a reason. You have endured much suffering, but your faith, though wavering, has not completely faded. There is something you need to know, and you must bring it back to share with the world." I blinked, not fully understanding why I had to bring this message back, but it seemed that God heard my confusion, for he continued, "Because you have nothing left to lose in this world, but everything to give. You are not deceived by glory or success, and it is your brokenness that makes you more receptive to my voice than anyone else." Then a window of time opened before me, not a frozen image, but like a film playing slowly. Jesus said, "About that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father." I recognized the words immediately, Matthew 24:36. I had read them in my Bible and heard them quoted by my pastor on many Sundays, but Jesus wasn't finished. "Still, I must show you the signs, so that my people may recognize when the time is near and prepare their hearts." Signs? I frowned as the window shifted before me, still unsure. "Why me?" I asked. "What am I being shown?" Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with compassion. "Because you need to see." And somehow, I didn't just hear his answer with my ears, I felt it resonate within my soul, like a breeze brushing through my spirit. "Watch closely," he said. "The signs I am about to show you will mark a turning point for the world. And after the world celebrates my resurrection in 2025, you will begin to see them more clearly." There was weight in his voice now, not merely words of encouragement, but the tone of a warning, urgent and real. My resurrection is not only a victory over death, it is the declaration of hope, of renewal purchased by my blood. It is the day of true life, of transformation, and it will mark a shift. My heart raced. I'd heard Easter messages my whole life, but this felt different. When Jesus himself spoke, each word carried eternal significance. He continued, and his voice turned grave. "The enemy knows the power of this day. He cannot change the truth, but he will attempt to hijack the moment after the world remembers salvation, to unleash his greatest deception. He will offer a false renewal, a counterfeit solution wrapped in convenience and reason, at the exact time when many are beginning to look toward heaven. After Easter 2025, the line between choosing me and choosing the system of the world will become painfully clear." Those words hit me like a wave. Choose Jesus or choose the world. Something we all think we understand, and yet Jesus warned me specifically about this. I wanted to ask more, but he gently raised his hand. Then the window before me surged with light and motion. The images became clearer, more vivid. "Now watch," Jesus said. "Watch how the signs unfold. Watch how the deception begins." The light flashed, and I held my breath. Like a giant film projected in the sky, scenes passed before me. I saw people crowding the streets, laughing in shopping malls, working in shining offices. On the surface, everything looked normal, but beneath it, something felt off. It wasn't war or chaos, it was hollowness. A quiet anxiety lingered in every face, in every hurried step. In the next scene, I saw luxury apartments, glowing screens, and wealthy people surrounded by comfort. But their eyes were empty, dead. Families gathered around dinner tables, but no one was really present. They were physically together, but their minds were lost in their phones, scrolling endlessly, detached from one another. I saw churches, their pews empty, altars untouched. Some churches still had crowds, but the messages had shifted. They were no longer preaching repentance or righteousness. They were giving motivational speeches about success and self-worth. And then I noticed something far more chilling. A darkness, not like a shadow, not like night, but something invisible and terrifying, was creeping into the world. It didn't attack, it didn't frighten. Instead, it dulled the senses, it numbed the soul. It made people indifferent to God, to truth, to eternity. Then Jesus spoke again, his voice full of sorrow yet certainty. "This is the first sign. When hearts grow cold toward the sacred, when the soul is neglected for the pleasures of this world, that is when the darkness finds its way in. Pay attention, John. This is only the beginning." The vision shifted again. The sky became like a vast screen, displaying vivid images of a world stepping into a new era. On giant displays in crowded city squares and across global news networks, familiar faces began to appear. Presidents, CEOs of major tech firms, leaders of banks and international organizations. Their faces exuded confidence and determination. "We are standing at a historic crossroads," one man in a flawlessly tailored suit declared to the masses. After years of economic turmoil, social unrest, and increasingly advanced cyber attacks, it's time for a bold solution. A global system designed to protect and elevate the quality of life for everyone. The crowds erupted in applause. The excitement was contagious. Bold letters flashed across the screens. Solution for the future, a new global system. What followed was the unveiling of a fully digitalized world economy. Cash, physical cards, and even passwords were deemed outdated. In their place, a revolutionary technology was introduced, a microchip, no larger than a grain of rice, implanted just beneath the skin. This chip will make life easier, a charismatic spokeswoman explained. With this digital ID, you'll never worry about losing your wallet, identity theft, or fraud. Just one touch. Pay bills, open doors, access your medical records. No paperwork, no passwords. It all sounded flawless, too flawless. Then I felt it, that cold shiver again. Jesus appeared beside me, his expression solemn. After Easter 2025, you will begin to see all of this come to pass, faster than you expect, he said. At first it will seem like a choice, a convenience, but quickly it will become a condition. Participation in society will demand it. The images continued to evolve. News anchors changed their tone. What began as excitement subtly shifted to insistence. Those who reject this technology may face difficulties accessing basic services, one anchor stated, her voice sweet but firm. This is not the loss of freedom, a smiling politician added. This is progress, safety for all, advancement for humanity. I swallowed hard. Jesus turned to me again, his presence radiant yet filled with urgency. "Remember what I told you, John," he said softly. "This is the second sign. Pay attention." I watched more closely. The device they promoted was remarkably small, embedded discreetly beneath the skin of the hand or forehead. It was nearly invisible unless you knew where to look, and yet it could replace everything. Your credit cards, ID, passport, keys, tickets, medical files. All of life digitized, reduced to a single chip. Just swipe once, they said, and everything you need is right there. Payment, access, movement. No wallets, no waiting. Total control. The people clapped. They cheered. But no one paused to question what might be hiding behind all that convenience. "Do you see?" Jesus asked. "This chip will become the gateway to every part of life. Buying, selling, traveling, healing, proving who you are. It will become inseparable from everyday existence, but the price is the soul. The cost is true freedom." His words echoed deep within me like thunder rolling across my spirit. What looked like progress was a slow, creeping control. A beautiful trap, so finely designed that people would walk into it smiling. I couldn't help but ask, "Lord, if it's so dangerous spiritually, why would people accept it?" Jesus looked at me, and in his eyes I saw both sorrow and compassion. At first, he said gently, "It won't seem dangerous at all. The enemy is clever. He doesn't appear as a monster, but as an angel of light, offering solutions that seem good, logical, and easy. People won't see the trap, not right away. They will accept it step by step, believing it's the answer to their problems. And by the time they realize what they've surrendered, it will feel too late." I stood in silence, my mind racing, but deep down I knew he was right. Then his voice calmed, reassuring but firm. "Those who refuse this system will face many hardships. They'll be labeled outcasts, seen as obstacles to progress. But listen, John, those who stand firm will remain free in me. I will be with them. I will never abandon them." And though I couldn't grasp every detail of what I'd seen or heard, something inside me began to awaken. I started to understand. Real freedom isn't always visible. It isn't always celebrated. In fact, in a world that's rapidly trading truth for comfort, true freedom may look like resistance, and it will cost something. But it will be worth everything. Society began to change. On the surface, everything seemed fine. orderly and normal. People continued their daily lives, bustling streets and daily transactions. In coffee shops, people just needed to swipe their hands to pay. No cash, no cards. Everyone seemed proud to be keeping up with the times. But something felt off. Despite their busy lives, people lacked warmth in their eyes. Their smiles and conversations no longer seemed genuine. There was an emptiness in every action, every gesture. I noticed those who hadn't undergone the implant began to be treated differently. Social pressure grew, and people like me couldn't easily shop, travel, or access social benefits. We were treated like outsiders, isolated from the rest of society. At home, families still sat together, but the conversations were no longer real. Words and pleasantries felt mechanical, lacking sincerity. People pretended to be happy, but I sensed a deep void of genuine emotion. Everything, from their words to their glances, was influenced by the implant. They were like puppets controlled by invisible signals, signals I couldn't see but could feel clearly. On the streets, I saw people walking aimlessly, following instructions from their devices. They believed they were acting freely, but in reality they were being controlled by an invisible force. Jesus had told me this, and now I saw it was true. People's free will was being eroded. They believed they were in control, but they were being guided without realizing it. Looking at those around me, I felt a thick fog covering them, a heaviness not just physically but spiritually. It was as though they had lost the ability to perceive the sacred, no longer hearing God's voice within them. I remembered Jesus' words. They think they are in control of the technology, but in reality, the technology and system control them. They are trading their immortal souls for temporary comfort. Those words echoed in my mind, and I felt a deep sadness. Jesus continued, "That is how the enemy works, slowly, subtly, step by step. It creates dependency. People will become entirely controllable. The children will grow up without knowing true freedom, and hearing my voice will become very difficult. Parents, trying to protect their children, implant them from a young age. They think they're doing what's best for their children's future, that it's the safest solution. But they don't realize that these children will grow up without understanding true freedom, and they'll struggle to connect with me." The sadness in his voice was undeniable. We are losing the most precious thing, our freedom and connection to the Creator. Some churches and influential leaders have begun to change their attitudes. They no longer condemn implants, now calling them a blessing from God, a tool to serve Him. They even say it has nothing to do with faith. Hearing this made my heart uneasy. It was a disturbing sign, as though they were opening the door to deception. Jesus said something I will never forget. "They will call my name with their lips, but their hearts will be far from me." Jesus warned me, many pastors will fall first. They will be deceived by outward success, the allure of the world. The pastor, with all his confidence, encouraged the congregation to get the implants, turning the church into an organization functioning like a business, focusing on data instead of the Holy Spirit. He didn't realize that he was leading his flock astray. Jesus spoke to me with deep conviction. These pastors think they are helping, but they are blind to the spiritual loss they are causing. The faithful feel anxious, unsettled, and they just want to hold on to their faith, but they are confused by what is happening. When church leaders began hearing objections, they quickly dismissed them, labeling them as negativity, paranoia, and division. They demanded silence or for dissenters to leave. The church became deeply divided, and those who opposed were isolated. Jesus said, "My true church is measured by faithfulness, even at the cost of sacrifice." I understood that those who stand firm in true faith would face challenges, but they would always have His protection and guidance. The government and large organizations began requiring people to get the implants to access public services, travel, or even work. I saw those who refused the implants being denied basic rights. They couldn't shop, use banks, or work. They were viewed as a threat, a burden on society. Their children struggled in school, being ostracized simply because their parents refused the implants. Society was clearly divided. Those who remained steadfast, refusing the implants, now lived on the margins. They couldn't buy, use banks, go to the doctor or work. They were restricted and abandoned by society. Yet they held on to their faith. Their lives were simple, self-sufficient. They exchanged goods, secretly gathered to pray, study the Bible, and support one another. Despite material hardships, they had peace in their hearts, a faith no one could take away. I saw how the system relentlessly pursued them. They were labeled as dissenters, a threat to the social order. And I knew that in a world like this, people would become the eyes of the system, reporting anyone who did not comply. I witnessed someone being denied bread simply because they didn't have the implant. But the cost became clearer. The government arrested the steadfast for causing disturbances, spreading fake news, or opposing progress. They were interrogated, fined, had their property seized, beaten, and detained. Those who refused the implants faced tremendous psychological pressure, forced to accept the system to escape the fear and pain. Jesus warned me, the enemy will use every means to wear them down. He will isolate them, using fear and pain to try to break their faith. Despite this, I understood that the faithful would never abandon Jesus, and he would protect them. I witnessed those who refused the implants gathering in remote areas. They were few in number and lacked many essentials, yet their spirits remained unbroken. They prayed wholeheartedly and worshipped sincerely, despite the hardships they faced. In their most desperate moments, a miracle would happen. Food would multiply and the sick would be healed. They lived in peace, surrounded by a divine light, even though they were physically exhausted. Jesus' words echoed in my mind. The faithful will never be forsaken, but they must be willing to suffer for my name. I realized that with unwavering faith, God would always guide them through the trials ahead. I couldn't help but ask Jesus, how can people resist the deception? How can they recognize it? Jesus answered gently, prepare now, before everything accelerates after Easter. The only way to stand firm is to know me deeply. Learn to hear my voice, dive into my word and the scriptures, pray without ceasing, and seek a close personal relationship through the Holy Spirit. Jesus continued, many of my people are not yet ready. Their faith is shallow, easily shaken. That's why you must warn them. Build a spiritual foundation on the rock, which is me. I felt the strength and urgency in his words. Only those who had built a solid foundation in Jesus beforehand would be able to stand firm in the days ahead. He added a profound statement, you cannot wait until then to start seeking me. The time to prepare is now. I began to understand that the enemy's plan is not one of direct force, but one that lures through convenience, false safety, and social pressure. A great change is coming, and it will come swiftly after Easter 2025. The global implant system will be enforced more aggressively, and the church, unfortunately, will compromise. Many believers, not realizing the danger, will be swept into the system. As I stood there, thinking about what Jesus had said, a deep sense of concern for those around me filled my heart. I wondered, how can they resist it? Jesus answered, many, even believers, will be deceived. Only those who have a deep, living relationship with me, those who know my voice through my word and the Holy Spirit, will stand firm. They have built their foundation on the rock. So go back and warn them. I realize the time to prepare is now. We can no longer afford to wait. The changes ahead will come fast, and only those with a deep connection to Christ will remain grounded in the truth. Suddenly, I felt a powerful, irresistible pull, as if being yanked backward, dragged into a dark, narrow tunnel. Everything around me began to change. The first sensation was one of sharp contrast. Suddenly, I felt the cold, damp stone bench press against my skin. It was completely different from the warmth I had just experienced. The aching pain in my old joints returned. While I had felt some relief at first, I was soon reminded of the harsh reality. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I noticed the face of a stranger, with a few wrinkles around his eyes, leaning over me with a concerned look. At that moment, one thought crossed my mind. Am I still alive? A miracle may have occurred, or perhaps this was the person that God sent so I could share my feelings. When I woke up, I saw a strange man standing near my bed. His name was Simon, about 50 years old, and he owned a small diner called Dino's Diner. I still remember that day clearly. He smiled kindly and said to me, "Hello, Mr. John. I'm Dino, the one who called the ambulance for you last night. I just wanted to check on you." Dino then handed me a cup of coffee and placed a small bag beside me, inside which were a toothbrush, toothpaste, and a clean towel. These simple, small things, though modest, were incredibly practical and touched my heart. Dino sat down on the chair next to my bed and asked me sincerely. He wasn't too curious about my past, but he gently asked, "Is there anyone I should contact for you?" That simple question made me feel a bit uneasy, but his kindness didn't make me feel intruded upon. I just shook my head, feeling a deep sadness. After I finished telling my story, Dino sat in silence for a moment, as if thinking. Then he looked directly at me and said that he couldn't imagine everything I had gone through, the pain and the near-death experience, but he believed me. He believed every word I said. Dino told me that evening he rarely took that route home, but that night something urged him to turn that way, and that's when he found me lying there. We both thought, no, we believed it was God's plan. Then Dino told me not to worry about the medical bills, as God had blessed his work enough to cover the costs. He considered it his way of helping me. He mentioned that at Dino's Diner the work was quite busy, but he needed someone to help with small tasks like wiping down tables, washing dishes and preparing vegetables. The job wasn't heavy, just required attention to detail. He also said I would be paid fairly for my work. Finally, Dino said there was a small room upstairs, not luxurious but clean and cozy. He told me I could stay there for free, at least until I got back on my feet. At that moment I was stunned, unable to believe what I was hearing. After so many years of being abandoned, neglected, now a complete stranger was treating me with such kindness and respect. Tears began to fall again, but this time they were tears of gratitude, of overwhelming emotion. So, this is where John's letter ends, and I believe that each of us can feel the gravity of the warnings that Jesus has shared. This is not just a near-death experience. It is a powerful reminder of the challenges we face and the changes that will come swiftly in the near future. Jesus warned us that with the rise of technology and the global system, a decisive choice will come: to choose the path of God or be swept into a system that we can no longer control. Freedom, our connection with God, will slowly be eroded, and only those who have built a solid foundation in faith will be able to stand firm. Remember, preparation cannot wait until the change has already occurred. We must start right now, diving into God's Word, praying, and building a deep and personal relationship with Him through the Holy Spirit. Only in this way can we recognize deception and hold on to our faith in every circumstance. And if you think this story was shocking, the next video will make you tremble before a vision God gave this person.